All right. Should you punish? This is the big question. Is it wrong? Some psychologists are now saying, and also many parenting manuals are teaching today, that punishment is wrong and is very harmful to a child. Some are teaching that it is cruel and should be illegal. Freud said that punishment caused neurotic anxiety in children. Should we rescue from all pain and punishment? In England, they're passing laws where you can't spank. They're doing all kinds of goofy things. I stood up in a meeting one time and I heard a great psychologist stand up and say, we now know that we should never punish, that we don't have to punish, there are other means. People, that is an unscientific statement. People working on their PhDs, there's over 500 studies out there that absolutely prove that punishment, when properly administered, is a very, very powerful tool. And sometimes it's absolutely necessary. And sometimes that is the only way to change behavior. And punishment is justified. Now, we know that punishment is important. But we have these people now that are quoting each other as experts who are saying, don't punish anybody. And the manuals are saying, don't punish. But punishment is a correct principle. And by all scientific standards, punishment works. Now, it can be cruel. You don't want to be cruel, and you can misuse punishment. And so you have to be careful about it. Okay, the world's opinions and fallacies on punishment, that it's morally wrong, including corporal punishment. That is not true. Punishment does not cause neurotic anxiety, the trauma. If punishment and pain caused neurosis or neurotic anxiety, we'd all be goofy. We've all experienced pain. We've all touched the hot stove. We've all been disappointed. We've all been bit by a dog or something. We've all experienced pain and fear. Is this true? Are you goofy? Well, pain is part of our experience in life. Pain is one of the greatest teachers we've got. Pain is a very essential part. It's not unnatural or ineffective. The world is full of pain. It does not cause aggression in kids. There's one thing that they say that it causes aggression. If you start to spank a kid or punish a kid and they swing at you, and then you back off because they did that, that's reinforcing that behavior. You understand? Studies show that when punishment is administered by a love giver, in love, that it actually strengthens the bond. I had this woman who didn't believe in punishment, and the kid got worse and worse and worse. And she came in to see me, and she says, what would I do? And I said, you know what you need to do. The kid is absolutely in your face. He's hostile. He's physically violent. And there are no checks on him. There are no consequences for what he does. He has got to have a little fear in him. Why don't you rob a bank? Is a little fear good? Why don't you go pet the rattlesnake? Is a little fear good? Fear is healthy. It keeps us from killing ourselves. And there needs to be some respect. And so I told this lady, do what you need to do. She said, all right, I'll do it. And the next week she came back. And she said the kid had a big tantrum. And she took him upstairs. He's about 5 years old. He was just awful. He was terrible. She put him over her knee. And she gave him some swats. And then she hugged him. And she gave him another swat. And she hugged him. And she says, this hurts me so bad. And you've been such a bad boy. But I love you enough that I will not let you grow up to be a bad man. And you have to understand that these things that you've been doing and saying are wrong, and you're going to get a spanking for it. And she spanked him. And she went downstairs and just cried and cried and cried. This was a very, very tender woman. And she didn't know what to do. The boy was getting progressively worse all the time. And he had no fear of anybody, no consequences of anything. Anybody know kids like this? And she took him up and gave him a spanking in love and in tenderness, and hugged him and went downstairs and just died. And a little bit later, he came downstairs, and his face was all sobbing, and he gave her a hug, and he gave her a big kiss. He says, Mama, do you love me? She says, I love you so much. He says, I love you too. People, it cleared the air. Even in a child, there is a sense of justice. And sometimes they're begging to have the scales of justice balanced so they can start over. It's kind of like an atonement. They have done something wrong. Now they've paid for it. Now we can get on with life. Does that make any sense to you? Spank them, love them, hug them, tell them how much you love them afterwards, and show love 10 times more than you did before. And that will strengthen the bond. And what the message is I love you enough to do this. It hurts me, it hurts you, but the justice has to be satisfied here. You will not do this, and you're being bad here, and I will not tolerate. We will not let you beat up the other kids. We will not let you cut people. We will not let you do this. This one kid took a key. He took a key and ran it down the back of one of the little kids in the house and made this big bloody mark right down the back of this kid's back. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. The kid got a spanking for that. Do you understand? Now, you will hear it said, don't spank a child, then you teach him to be violent. That is opinion. That is not scientific studies. 500 studies show, beyond a doubt, that punishment is absolutely necessary sometimes, and sometimes the only thing that will correct behavior. Without punishment, we wouldn't have any prisons. Okay, let's let them all out. Let's let the murderers out. Let's let them out. Okay? Now, in one place, they said they're passing a law that if the kids commit a felony, we're going to put the parents in jail. I was up in Canada, and they were talking to me about the law they were trying to get passed. That if the child commits a felony, the parents can go to jail for up to 2 years. They said, Mr. Jones, what do you think of that? I says, let me get this straight. You mean if I'm trying to get my kid to do good stuff, and I'm working with him, and he goes off and he robs somebody or does something, they would put me in jail if he's a minor? They said, yes. You mean because I can't control my kids, they're going to put me in jail? Because I don't want him to do that. If I taught him to do that, then there's some liability there. Do you see? But if I've been trying to teach him right, and I've taught him what's right, and he goes out and does something against my will, you mean I go to jail for that? Because I can't control him? They said, yeah. What do you think of that law? I said, well, let me tell you exactly what I think of the law. The police are supposed to stop the criminals. Is that right? Therefore, if the police cannot stop the criminals, and the criminals continue to commit crime, let's put the police in jail. They said, that's ridiculous. They said, well, you answered your own question. You can't be held accountable for people like that. These kids do the crime, they're getting away with murder. Okay, the more punishment, the better? That's totally wrong. The more you use, the less effective it is. These are some myths. Behavioral psychologists on punishment are teaching that if you want to have punishment, that it should be relative to the crime. In other words, if they don't do the dishes, then they miss a meal. If they don't feed their dog, they lose the dog. Do you understand? It shouldn't be if they don't clean their room that you do something out here that's totally unconnected. So to be most effective, these are the elements. It should be relative. It should be intense. Mild punishments do not work. 25-cent speeding tickets are a joke. You charge a guy $500 for speeding and he will stop doing it. Do you understand? Otherwise, it's a joke. Law without consequence is an absolute farce. There is no law. And it should be immediate. The quicker it follows the crime, the better it is. And there should be no escape. Once the law is broken, you don't compromise, you do not renegotiate, you put the law in effect. Get the facts and apply the law. And if you want to renegotiate it later, change the rules later, fine, but not now. The law is in effect. And stop making all the exceptions to the rule. I'll let you go this time. You put so many holes and you riddle the rule till there is no law anymore. So no more exceptions. Get good rules and very, very, very seldom exceptions. We do not yell in this house is the rule, unless there's a fire or an emergency. That's how you make the rule. So people aren't yelling. Many studies show and prove that punishment is sometimes necessary and often very effective when consequences fail. I'm going to tell you about this boy. He's been stealing $1 out of his mother's purse for a month in change or in cash. Okay, folded money. And after a month, she catches him. You put that back. And she spanks his hand and says, don't you ever do that again. I'm very, very disappointed in you. And don't ever do that again. I'm going to put my purse up. Don't ever do that again. And she sends him off to school. What has that boy learned? What has the boy learned? Crime pays. You get away with it 29 times out of 30. Does crime pay in that house? But mom's on the program. And the boy comes back. He says, where's my $200 bike? She says, I sold it for $100. I assume that I don't catch you all the time. So whenever you steal something from me, something like that's going to happen. I will not tolerate that in this house. You sold my $200 bike that I bought with my money? I said, yeah, I sure did. Before he got in her purse again, will he think? Because there was a consequence. If all you do is talk and warn and scold and are angry, it makes no difference at all. Consequence, consequence, consequence.